Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Couch Scouts podcast. I am your host, Matt Cooper. With me is my co host, Matt Rupert.
What's going on, brother?
And no Matt Jackson tonight. He is came down with a little stomach bug today. So prayers up for Matt Jackson. Hope you feel better and get some sleep. The newborn is on a sleep regression. So prayers for Matt Jackson on that one. We all, at least you and I know what that's like. So 4th of July coming up this week. Any plans for the 4th?
No big plans, but I'm just going to be slow cooking some meat. I got a big pork shoulder. Can't wait to get that in the oven. Make a bunch of food. Going to do just like a whole southern kind of barbecue, mac and cheese, green bean casserole, rolls,
Oh yeah.
everything to put on some weight. It's going to be great.
Making my mouth water, man. 4th of July, fireworks and meat. That's what it's all about. So
That's all that matters.
I'll be doing some smash burgers for us. Very much looking forward to that. So yeah, happy Independence Day to all of our listeners. Well, tonight we are going to be continuing our series of most to gain and most to lose. And if you haven't heard our first two episodes in the series, check it out. We did quarterbacks with the most to gain and then running backs with the most to gain and most to lose. And this week we are looking at the wide receiver position. So we will be using startup ADP to go position by position, discussing which players on your dynasty rosters have the most to gain and the most to lose in terms of their dynasty value this upcoming season. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to really quickly hit a couple of things that we want you guys to know because it's great resources and tools. First is our Discord. It's totally free. This isn't a commercial. We just want you to come join, be part of our community. We want to get to know you guys that are listening to the show. And there's a great group of guys. It's over 90 people in that Discord now. It's active every day. People posting trades or they're on the clock. Who should I pick? Reacting to news, posting barbecue pictures on the 4th of July, all that good stuff. So come join the community. And then our rookie guide. It is $10, very cheap for hundreds of hours of research that went into it that you don't have to do yourself. It's a 70-plus page PDF covering over 60 prospects, in-depth analysis, film breakdown, going over each trait for each player, where we would grade them in our film grade, where we would rank them, where we would draft them, all that kind of stuff. So pick up that copy. Links for both of those things, Discord and Rookie Guide, are in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. So without further ado, let's get into it. Wide receivers with the most to gain and the most to lose. We're going to start with most to gain here. Rupert, who is the first wide receiver that you chose with the most to gain in dynasty value this season?
I went with Hollywood Brown, and I think he's averaged in his end of year production pretty much where he's valued at right now at wide receiver 46. Kind of been in that 30 to 52 range throughout most of his career. I think his best finish was wide receiver 25. But now he's with the best quarterback he's ever had the chance to play with. And when he was healthy with Kyler Murray, he was a target monster. He was, getting a bunch of targets, getting open down the field, even in the intermediate part of the field. And I see a world where he could pretty much double his dynasty value this year. Let's say he has a big year with Patrick Mahomes, and who knows what happens with Rashee Rice. Do they keep him around after that? To pair with Xavier Worthy, basically have like a Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, insanely fast wide receiver duo. So I definitely see a world where he can really dramatically increase his value after having a big year this year.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is going in the 10th round of dynasty startups in a 12-team league. Where does he have to go down? Like his value can
Right.
only go up. And so it feels like you're buying him kind of at his floor. And then there's the ceiling of like he's in the Chiefs offense. And so I'm not like super bullish on the guy or saying like, oh, he's definitely going to have a monster season. I think it's very possible that you draft him and he's just a wide receiver 3 again. But I mean, it's wide receiver 46 price tag. So, its value is not going to go significantly down. I think it's only going to go up. And I think that's a good call out. For me, I actually also went with another guy in the 10th round of 12-team startups. You went with wide receiver 46. I'm going wide receiver 48, Deontay Johnson. And anybody listening to this show that has listened for any amount of time knows we love Deontay Johnson, specifically you and I. Rupert,
Yeah,
we love him. Jackson always
for
makes fun
years.
of us for how much we love him. But the film doesn't lie, man. This dude is a beast, and it shows up in the target numbers. He's been like top 10 in the league in targets ever since he stepped foot in the league. He's an absolute target earner. He gets open, he creates separation. And people forget that he was the PPR wide receiver 8 overall when Ben Roethlisberger was his quarterback. Even like the ghost, the shell of Ben Roethlisberger, and everybody's like, oh, he's just throwing, check down Charlie's Deontay Johnson. So what? Deontay's getting open, and Ben Roethlisberger knows how to read the defense, and he's getting it to him. And that's the last time he's had competent quarterback play. Since
Hmm.
then, it has been Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and Matt Canada calling the plays, and it's just been a train wreck. And he's got a fresh start in a new place with a quarterback that I think is more talented than any of those guys. And he just supported a pretty good fantasy season for a really washed up Adam Thielen. And I think Deontay Johnson's going to step in and be an absolute target hog this year, like he always has been. I think he's going to score a lot more fantasy points on those targets than he has the last few years. And at wide receiver 48, man, I mean, that is cheap. Like you're paying wide receiver 4 price for a guy that has wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes. And he's not even that old yet. I mean, he's 26, 27. So it's not like he's
Yep.
this like 30-year-old dude. So I really don't understand that price at all. I think he's a guy that could be going, um, I mean, look, as early as, let's see, Mike Evans is going round 7. So that's 3 rounds higher. That I could definitely see that in his range of outcomes. You're looking at, guys like Debo Samuel in the 6th round. So yeah, I think I absolutely could see him going anywhere from 5th to 7th round in dynasty startups next year, and he's going in round 10 right now. So buy Deontay Johnson, and we're gonna both go 2 first since Jackson's not on the show. We're gonna each hit 2 to gain and 2 to lose. So Rupert, who is your second guy?
Well, you just went wide receiver 48, and I'm going wide receiver 49, Jameson Williams.
Okay.
Admittedly, he had an incredibly disappointing rookie season where it was basically redshirt coming off the ACL, but also kind of followed up with a pretty lackluster second season. Wasn't really used a lot, was kind of relegated to wide receiver 3 and 4 on his team. But man, did he show some flashes last year, and we know what his college tape shows us. So the reports this offseason have just been raving out of Lions camp about him and how he's pretty much seemingly locked down that wide receiver 2 position. So even though I'm a little scared after the last season, I can see a world where he bumps up into the top 20 if he can have a monster year.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, am I saying that Jameson Williams is probably going to break out? No. Like I would say history tells us that guys that have kind of face planted the way he has his first couple years in the league is probably not going to pan out. But could he? Is there all the opportunity in the world for him to? And is there, any risk basically with drafting him at this cost? I think a couple years ago when everybody had to pay like a first plus for the upside of what they thought he could be, obviously that has turned out to not have been a good investment. But you don't have to pay that anymore. I mean, you could go get him for pretty cheap, and I really, yeah, maybe he flames out, has another bad season, and he's worthless. If that's the case, it didn't really cost you much to find out, but there's plenty of room for him to be a usable fantasy asset, I think. So plenty of talent there. And even if you look at Matt Harmon, I love and respect Matt Harmon's work. He's kind of broken down the season of Jameson Williams last year, and the first half of the season, it was like, man, this dude is abysmal. Like he's not getting open. His success rates versus every type of coverage is just awful. Second half of the season, it started to look a lot more respectable. So this guy has a very unique start to his career, and maybe he is that outlier. So I don't hate that pick at all.
And
Well,
it really wasn't
go ahead.
that long ago too either, where it was like year 3 was a breakout for wide receivers. And I think we just saw this recently with Nico Collins. Like sometimes it takes some guys a couple years, so it could definitely be the not not particularly an outlier, but kind of return to the norm of the past. But
Yeah,
yeah, I if he has another face plant this season, then yeah, it's his value's going to be tanked, and no one's going to want to touch him. But and rightfully so. But
yeah.
at this, like you
Well,
said, at this value, like what are you losing?
I hope he has that breakout season because as of right now, one of my bigger rookie misses that I've had, he was my wide receiver 2 in that class behind Wilson, above, guys like Olave and Drake London, who we're going to talk about later on this show. Spoiler alert. Um, so I was higher on Jameson than them, and I have a lot of Jameson shares on my team because he was falling to 6 or 7 in that draft that year, and I was scooping him up. So yeah, I would love for this to be a huge riser with a lot of gain in value this year. Well, we have been dumpster diving, picking in the wide receiver 40s. I'm gonna bring us up a little bit, not crazy much. I'm going with wide receiver 33, Jaden Reed, as my other wide receiver with the most to gain. And Jaden Reed he's a talented guy, had a good rookie season, was a second round draft pick last year, was a prospect that we liked a lot. And a lot of people don't know this. From week 10 to week 17 last year, I don't know why this doesn't get talked about more. Week 10 to week 17, so the second half of the season, fantasy playoffs, Jaden Reed was the PPR wide receiver 10 the second half of the season. I mean, this dude established himself as the clear top option in Green Bay, was putting up big games week in and week out, was Jordan Love's favorite target. And, I just don't really get why there's not more hype for this guy. Wide receiver 33 is pretty low. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is right now going in the 7th round of startup drafts. He's going below guys like Keon Coleman, who we both don't think is a very good prospect. Um, George Pickens, who we're going to talk about in a minute. I think he's better than George Pickens. Showed more in 1 year than George Pickens has showed in 2. Just there's a bunch of guys going in front of him that I could easily see him leapfrogging. When you talk about a guy his age, that if he just continues to do what he already did the second half of last season, he's going to fly up draft boards by this time next year. So I think, yes, it's a crowded room. There's a lot of talent. You got Dobbs and you've got Watson if he's healthy, and you've got Wicks, and even you got Musgrave and Kraft. There's a lot going on in that room, but the guy that showed it last year and clearly established himself as the number 1 guy is Jaden Reed. So yeah, what do you think about that, Rupert? He's a guy I think has a lot of room to go up in value.
Yeah, it seems like Wicks has been kind of the fantasy darling of the offseason. Like, oh, he's a sleeper this year. Go buy Wicks, go buy Wicks, go buy Wicks. And everyone's just seemingly forgotten about Jaden Reed. One of the things that, we loved about him, like in his college tape, and he showed it at the NFL level last year, is he's a really good red zone threat. He's not the biggest guy. He's not one of those guys that's 6'5" and going to go up and make every contested catch, but he just has that understanding of being able to work in space and get open in the red zone that, not everyone has. So, he's probably going to be their touchdown producer, and he consistently earns targets, as you saw in the second half of last year. So really like this call out. And it's just a reminder like how fun that Green Bay offense is.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of talent, a lot of young talent. And it's ridiculous that Green Bay just manages to keep finding high level quarterbacks
Yeah.
for 20 plus years now. But moving on, let's talk about some of the wide receivers with the most to lose. And it's never fun talking about that. But before we do, I got a little something I got to tease for you guys. So we've been working behind the scenes. It's a dynasty summer. You've been maybe feeling like, hey, there's not as much content coming out. There's, obviously in the dynasty world, there's nothing new to react to. But we've been taking advantage of the lull. We've been behind the scenes working our tails off to get some exciting stuff in the works for you guys. And I just want to make a big announcement. We're launching our own website. It's coming. We're launching our own website. There's going to be memberships. We're going to have our own film room that's going to be heavily focused on Devi players, with all 22 film in there. We're going to have our rookie guide that as part of membership packages. We're going to have one-on-one consultations where you can get with us on a Zoom call, and we can help you break down your dynasty team and develop a strategy. We got all kinds of stuff in the works. We're even going to have merch. So if you've ever thought, hey, I would love to have a Couch Scouts hat or Couch Scouts hoodie or Couch Scouts shirt, it's in the works, man. So we're not ready to roll it out to the public yet, but I just wanted to give you guys a little forecasting of what's going to be coming your way in a month or two, and you're not going to want to miss it. So with that being said, let's get into wide receivers with the most to lose. And Rupert, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I'll start off with Chris Olave. He's the guy that's valued at wide receiver 11 right now. And he was the guy that we liked coming out of the draft, but it seemed like he maybe didn't have the highest upside. And right now it seems like he's being valued at like his absolute upside, which I think is he finished wide receiver 16 last year, had 1,100 yards, only 5 touchdowns. His rookie year, just over 1,000, finished as wide receiver 25. And our concerns kind of coming out of college, not really being a red zone threat, being more of a finesse player, kind of has seemingly showed in our eyes with his lack of touchdowns. And I feel like his offense got a lot worse this offseason. He's still got Derek Carr, quarterback. Got a coach that's probably going to be on the hot seat. So I don't really see his production improving this year. I feel like he's kind of reached about his ceiling. And I can totally see a world where he ends up dropping down in, the 20s, 30s next year.
Yeah, that's an interesting call out. A guy that it kind of reminds me of is like Terry McLaurin. Early in his career, it was like, man, this guy's so talented. Everybody can see how talented he is. And it was easy to just, make the quarterback excuse for him, which, he did. He had bad quarterback play. But, all of a sudden you wake up and you're, he was old coming in as a rookie anyway, which Olave kind of was too. I mean, he was not an early declare, but you wake up one morning and you're like, Terry McLaurin's 27 years old and he still hasn't even had a wide receiver 2 season yet. He's just been like this, uh, you know, hanging around the 20 to 24 range his whole career. I said not wide receiver 2. I meant, he's not been a wide receiver, high end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. Like he was being drafted that way, but the production hadn't matched it yet. And you're like, wow, he's like 27 already. Like, is this ever going to happen? And up to this point, it really hasn't. So, I could definitely see Olave having a similar type of career trajectory. And I actually thought about putting him as my wide receiver with the most to lose. But instead, I chose the guy coming right after him, literally within one pick of each other in ADP, wide receiver 12, Drake London. And it kind of pains me to say it because I love Drake London. I loved him as a prospect. I see all the talent in the world there. I think he's an underrated route runner. Obviously, we know the contested catch abilities there. He's really good after the catch. He has certainly shown plenty of flashes of talent in the league. But you talk about a guy that has proven even less than Chris Olave. I mean, Drake London has been finishing in the wide receiver like 36 range in PPR, and he's going as the wide receiver 12. So as much as I like Drake London and I think he's going to break out this year, and I hope he's going to break out this year, it feels like he's kind of already priced as if he's already broken out, and it hasn't happened yet. So how much higher can he get than 12? I mean, could he come in and have like a wide receiver 6 finish or something like that, I guess, is in the range of outcomes, and it could happen, and he could move up above, like Olave, who you just mentioned. Could he come up above, um, let's say a guy like Malik Neighbors, who's at wide receiver 10? Could he go up above Tyreek Hill at 9 because he's getting a little bit older? Yeah, there's a couple guys that I could see him jumping with a really, really good season, but it's far more likely, that he, even if he finished like wide receiver 16 or something, he's going to drop. Like
Yeah.
there's just way more room for him to go down than to go up. And I'm never comfortable when I feel like I'm drafting a guy as if he's already done something that he hasn't already done. So I love Drake London. The shares that I have, I'm happily holding and excited and hoping that he's going to break out this season, but I'm not buying him at these prices. I think he's got a lot of room to be a lot less valuable at this time next year.
Yeah, 100% agree. Perfect call out. Again, like you said, he's being priced as already he like broke out 1 or 2 years ago, and like you said, he hasn't even finished top 30 yet. So perfect call out. And I can see a world with Kirk Cousins where he does finish wide receiver 10, but it's like what you move up like 2 spots. So really good call out.
Yeah. So who was your next guy, Rupert?
I went with another guy that I love as a player, but kind of same philosophy where I can see a path for him to drop down. That's Nico Collins. Right now, he's ranked as wide receiver 16. He had a really great season last year, and he's linked to a great quarterback. But when you go back and look at his season, he really took off once Tank Dell was injured, I think in week 10, if I remember right. So basically, like the second half of the year, he was much more consistently putting up numbers. He would have much more duds when Tank Dell was in the lineup. And so Dell broke his leg. So it's not like a catastrophic knee injury where he has ligaments to heal is much cleaner injury to recover from. So he's seemingly back at full strength now. And then they go and add Stephon Diggs to their wide receiver room. Where's that going to leave him? He's the number 1 ranked wide receiver on the list for the Texans. So I could see a world where, Tank Dell finishes as their top producing wide receiver, or Diggs finishes as their top producing wide receiver. That's just going to bring him down because he's being valued right now as the top wide receiver in that room. So I can see where there's just not enough, there's too many mouths to feed in that room. So his production, he's not going to have 1,300 yards this year, doesn't get 10 touchdowns. So I can definitely see a world where he has, much more mediocre year despite his talent, and his value drops because of that.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with this one. This might be our first like semi disagreement, because I actually thought about putting Nico Collins on the most to gain list. And the reason I didn't is for all the reasons that you mentioned, like bringing Diggs in, the target competition. Are there, how many yards does CJ Stroud have to throw for to really sustain what we hope for all 3 of these wide receivers? But I will say this, because Diggs is as old as he is, even if Nico does take a small step back this year, I think people are going to understand why that happened. And they're just going to say, well, look, Nico Collins has been locked up with this long-term contract. Diggs is an older guy. He's not going to be in the way for too terribly long. And, the underlying numbers, whether you're looking at Harmon's reception perception data, which is very, very good for Nico Collins, the target share, even, you mentioned the splits with and without Tank Dell. It's not as drastic as a lot of people think. If you go back and look at just weeks 1 through 9 of last season, the beginning of the year, Nico Collins was wide receiver 15 on a per game basis. So it's not like all of his production came after Tank Dell went out. He was wide receiver. I think he finished as like wide receiver 10 or 12 on the year. So he did like really explode late in the year. But early on in the year, it's not like he was a slouch. He was averaging over 15 PPR fantasy points a game. He was ranked 15th in a per game basis. So he was producing pretty consistently all season long with or without Tank Dell. I think he's a really talented young guy. They locked him up long term. And there's definitely some guys in front of him on ADP that I could see him jumping just if he does what he did last season again. Just repeat, like, don't even, you don't have to get better. Just repeat the performance. At his age, at 25 years old, you go out, you have another top 12 wide receiver finish. You're going up from 16. You're going above Devontae Smith. You're going above Michael Pittman. You're going above Chris Olave. Like, all he's got to do is just go out there and do what he did last year again, um, which might be hard with Diggs in the room, but I could see him actually going up by this time next year. So, yeah, I mean, but I could see what you're saying too. Like, I could see it going either way. But I love the player, and I love that
Yeah,
they just locked him
same.
up to that long-term contract. So,
Yeah, he's so talented. But yeah, weeks 1 through 9, like you said, on a per game basis, he's really good. He had 2 absolute monster weeks that I think really kind of skews that data a little bit.
okay.
He had the 1 week where he had 27 points and another week where he had almost 39.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was just kind of like what I was going by.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, let's get into my last guy. Mike from Dynasty Dog says, "What's up, gents? Glad you could join us, Mike." I'm going to get into my last guy. And now that Mike's here, I'm going to pick on somebody that I know he absolutely loves.
Perfect timing.
My last wide receiver with the most to lose in 2024 is George Pickens, ranked at wide receiver 24 on this Dynasty Data Labs ADP, currently being drafted in the 6th round of startups. And he is going above guys, just to name a few. He's going above guys like Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison, Debo Samuel, Lad McConkey, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jaden Reed, Devontae Adams. I mean, there's a lot of guys behind him that I would rather draft. And I know that there's some talent there. There's certainly flashes of really big talent with George Pickens. And I know that his quarterback play has not been very good. And so a lot of like why because he's another guy that has not produced inside the top 30 finishers at the wide receiver position yet through 2 years. He's not been a high target volume earner, and he's not been very good from a fantasy perspective. He's not a guy that you've been reliably able to put in your starting lineup. And the reason that 3 years in, people are still believing and hoping and putting him at wide receiver 24 is because he's got the built-in quarterback excuse. And a lot of people think that's going to get better this year, which it should, right? I mean, Matt Canada's not there anymore. Deontay Johnson was there, and he was taking a lot of targets. Russell Wilson, for whatever you want to say about what's left of Russell Wilson, he's better than Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. So I get all of that. And I also get that Russell Wilson loves to throw deep and throw jump balls, which is what George Pickens specializes in. But I also just think George Pickens is who he is. He's not a great route runner. He doesn't get open. He's a contested catch savant. And that's just limited in how good it actually is for fantasy. So I think there's just a lot of guys behind him that I would rather have in a dynasty league. I think there's a lot of room because if he goes out there 3rd year in a row, all the excuses are gone. You don't have Matt Canada. You don't have Deontay Johnson. You have a competent quarterback, and you go out there and do the same thing again. That value is going to plummet. Like, this is the put up or shut up year for George Pickens. And I maybe he puts up, but there's a good chance he shuts up. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. What do you think, Rupert?
100% agree. I think he's valued at his ceiling. Like you said, he's not, going to be a target monster because he's not a guy that's going to be getting open all the time. He does have kind of the perfect quarterback for his skill set, being a contested catch savant, but that it just really limits his upside, the amount of targets he's going to be able to earn. And I can definitely see a world where he has magical monster season, but I can also see a world where he's gets in the coach's doghouse again, and he may be off the Steelers in a year or two. So
Yeah, that's true.
maybe
I mean,
the floor is so low for him.
yeah, the off-field stuff, or not even off the field, because it shows up on the field with like
Yeah,
effort
exactly.
level and visible bad body language, bad attitude. But like, that's a factor. There was a point last season where he made that viral play where he didn't block for Jalen Warren, and it would have been a touchdown. And there's all this stuff, and like, people were, from a dynasty perspective, I remember on Twitter, people were jumping ship. They were like, get rid of this guy. He's going to get cut. Like, and
Yeah.
this offseason, his value has kind of been resurrected because Deontay Johnson got traded and Russell Wilson came in and all this stuff. But like, there was a point last year where, as a second-year player, people were already ready to give up on him, jump ship, and there's good reasons for why. So it's not going to take much. All it's going to take is just a little nudge, and
Yep.
everybody's going to jump ship. His value is going to plummet. So I think he's a lot riskier than a lot of people think that he is. So that about does it for our show. 2 wide receivers from each of us. Yeah, Mike says we believe heavy over here. I know. I've seen your Twitter account, man. Love you, Mike. But yeah, so that's 2 wide receivers that we each think can gain a significant amount of value or lose a significant amount of value this season. And hope you guys have enjoyed the show. Gave you a little teaser of some exciting things to come in the Couch Scouts world. So get excited for that. And we'll see you guys next week. But Rupert, as we sign off, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah. Follow me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter.
Yep, and you can find me at CouchScoutsFF on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube at CouchScouts. Look us up, Couch Scouts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know, we're on all the platforms. And so wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts, find us, leave us a rating and review. Helps other people find the show. Give us a like. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, all that good stuff. But we really appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all. Happy 4th.